Oh, I see so many lovely people, at least on my first screen of Zoom, folks. Hey, Mary Paget. Hey, Marcia. Nancy, how you doing? Hey, Joan. Oh, I see Catherine Harsha. Hey, Catherine. All right, we're going to continue letting folks in, but I do want to get started because we have an excellent presentation this evening. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Brian Fontaine Isaac. I'm the artistic director for Encore Creativity, and we are about to commence one of our monthly masterclass sessions. And I am so grateful that so many of you registered for tonight's event, one of our many free opportunities to kind of deepen your knowledge of multidisciplinary arts. Tonight's masterclass is called Behind the Curtain, How an Opera Comes Together, with Washington National Opera's artistic director, Francesca Zambello. You'll step into the role of an artistic director and explore the intricate world of opera production in this dynamic and immersive masterclass. From the initial spark of inspiration to the final curtain call, participants will gain a rare, behind the scenes look at the artistic decisions and creative collaborations that bring an opera to life. This is such a privilege to be able to take this masterclass and to learn this information this evening. And I want to remind you, as part of our masterclass series, we will typically have about 60 to 70 minutes or so, depending on our presenter, of lecture. And during that time, if you have any questions that are burning, please make sure to pop them into the chat. I'm going to be keeping track of every single question, and our presenter this evening, Francesca, will do the same. If she looks at a question and determines that it needs to be answered, it's particularly prescient for the conversation, she might answer it in real time, but we will certainly come back to all of those questions in the chat when we wrap up our 60-minute or so lecture and open it up for a Q&A. Until that Q&A, as a reminder, please remain muted unless you are asked to unmute to participate in the class this evening. And then we will open it up for about 15 or so minutes where you can unmute and engage with our presenter. So I would love to introduce to you Francesca Zambello, and I'll start by reading her incredible bio. Internationally recognized director of opera and theater, Francesca Zambello is the artistic director of Washington National Opera, a post she has held since 2012. She has directed many W&O productions, including Of Mice and Men, which had its debut in 2001, Fidelio, Billy Budd, Porgy and Bess, Salome, Showboat, The Force of Destiny, the world premiere of children's opera The Lion, the Unicorn, and Me, Florencia in the Amazon, The Little Prince, Dialogues of the Carmelites, Dead Man Walking, Aida, and Candide. In the spring of 2016, she also directed W&O's first ever complete Ring Cycles and brought the production to San Francisco Opera in 2018, both to great critical and public acclaim. From 2010 to 2022, Zambello held the position of artistic and general director of the Glimmerglass Festival in Central New York. She served as the artistic advisor to the San Francisco Opera from 2005 to 2011, and as the artistic director of the Skylight Theater from 1987 to 1992, and as an adjunct professor at Yale University. Zambello's American directing debut took place at the Houston Grand Opera with a production of Fidelio in 1984, and her European debut took place at Teatro La Fenice in Venice with Beatrice di Tenda in 1987. A hallmark of Zambello's creative leadership is collaborating with outstanding artists and designers and promoting emerging talent while championing women and diversity among her artistic and production personnel. She takes a special interest in new music theater works, innovative productions, and producing theater and opera for wider audiences. She has staged many new productions at major theaters, festivals, and opera houses in Europe, Asia, and the United States. An American who grew up in Europe, Zambello speaks French, Italian, German, and Russian. She attended Moscow University and Colgate University, and we are so privileged to have Ms. Zambello with us this evening. And so I will turn the presentation over to her, and I welcome all of you to tonight's session. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Nice to see so many people interested in this talk. Thank you very much for coming. And we will get started. So just a little bit about the Washington National Opera. We are what's called an affiliate of the Kennedy Center, which means that we are rather different than other opera companies because we are an organization within the National Arts Organization. So we are very much like the National Symphony, the Fortis Chamber Music, Washington Ballet. We're all under the big umbrella of the Kennedy Center. So that makes us quite different than, I'm sure many of you live in different cities everywhere where there's an opera company, XYZ, and it's an independent, separate thing. So the great thing is that we are part of this very august institution. And it means that we can use all of our other collaborators, whether it be the symphony or jazz, often in works that we do, so that we have a kind of a very broad programming. And I'll talk about how we do that in a second. We also have access to, which is very important in producing any kind of theater these days, to multiple theaters. Kennedy Center has an opera house that seats about 2,000 people, the Eisenhower Theater, which is 1,000, and the Terrace Theater, which is 500. So again, unlike other opera companies, we produce in a season in multiple venues. We have our own Washington National Opera Chorus. We have our own Washington National Opera Children's Chorus and the Kennedy Center Washington National Opera Orchestra as well. So there are a lot of organizations that are all part of us who are sort of the umbrella under the bigger umbrella. So my job is in partnership with the general director, Timothy O'Leary. And as the artistic director, my job is really about creating everything that goes on stage. With my colleagues, I determine the whole season, what we're producing, what we're presenting, who's singing, who's designing, who's conducting, who the supers are, who the chorus is, the entire repertory. And I do that very much in collaboration. Of course, I can't just say, oh, okay, we're going to do this and that, but rather I do it in collaboration with all of the respective departments in the Kennedy Center, the development department, the marketing department, finance department, PR, just because of course you can't just say like, I want to do this, this, and this, because in these days and for a long time, not everything is affordable. So my job is to curate a season is how I best like to describe it. We have a certain number of what we call slots in a season, which for us include 4 in the Opera House, and then usually 1 or 2 in the Eisenhower, and then 2 different things in the Terrace Theater, plus concerts and recitals that may augment our programming. And all of that is rather flexible, and it changes somewhat year to year. So what happens when you go about, let's start with just the very initial thing, which is planning the season. So planning a season means that you can't, again, as I say, I can't always do everything that I want. You start out by planning what we call tent poles. What are the pieces that what we call the ABCs of opera, Aida, Bohème, Carmen, the popular titles. And within a season of, let's say, 6 or 7 operas, you must have 2 tent poles. You must have 2 tent poles because otherwise you will not be able to support some of the other repertory that may not be as popular with everybody. And the tent poles really provide you some kind of economic stability. And of course, not everybody wants to see La Bohème again, but a lot of people want to see it for the first time. And then from then on down, I begin to shape what are the other things that are going to go in concert with that. Usually we, the Washington National Opera, have a very healthy commitment to new works. Also, as national in our title suggests, we have a very strong commitment to American artists, composers, librettists, conductors, singers, everything. So that's kind of our starting place. So we will always have every year one or sometimes even two American operas. We also have a program that we augment that with, which is called the American Opera Initiative, where we commission young composers and librettists every year to write 3 short operas, 1-act, 20-minute operas. Then I will go to what I call the middle ground repertory. And so when I think of just in American titles, for example, this year we're doing Porgy and Bess. We've done Champion, we've done Lost in the Stars, Appomattox. Just every year we have at least one big American title, and sometimes it's a world premiere, like we did Grounded at the opening of last season by Janine Tesori, which then went on to the Met. Then I have what I call the middle ground repertory that may not be as popular, but it is, of course, very important to produce. That could be anything from, Wozzeck, Strauss operas, lesser known Italian operas, bel canto works, things that, generally I find opera lovers, they want to see those things, but not everybody does. So you have to sort of, you have to make sure you're working within a big box that fills a lot of different tastes. I sometimes jokingly call it the dim sum platter of programming, because you really do need a very broad range of things. Once we have determined the repertory, and that usually happens 2 years in advance. So we are currently planning for the 27-28 season right now. We're in the middle of 24-25. We will soon be announcing in the beginning of March our 25-26 season. That's set. And then we have a pretty good idea what we're doing in 26-27. I can't tell you any of those things. And then now we're looking at the tent poles of 27-28. By the way, the tent poles, Aida, Bohème, Carmen, Figaro, Traviata, you can't do them. You have to wait. You have to do them sort of every 7 to 10 years. You can't go more often than that with those pieces. Okay, so once we've got our repertory planned, we of course have to work in concert with the marketing department and development department. Do these operas fit all of our subscription needs? Do they program out over the year time-wise with a calendar? Does development find enough projects that are interesting to raise money on? Of course, many donors want to give to very specific things, and others are willing to give to a general fund. But let's say, so it's about 2 years out and we have our repertory planned. We then begin to start with the most important pieces about something. That means the production. Is it a new physical production? And I'm sure some of you are opera goers and it says new production. Sometimes it's brand new everything, sets and costumes. Sometimes it's new to a certain company. Sometimes it's a shared production with other companies. So we establish what is the production. Then the key participants, who is conducting, directing, and who is starring in this. And of course, I'm talking to people who love music. There are not tons of stars in opera anymore. It's not, the heyday of, Maria Callas and Luciano Pavarotti does not exist because people don't buy recordings anymore. So they don't have a familiarity with so many singers. So what I try to do is hire certainly the most important or most interesting artists, and usually I will start with American artists and then balance that with international artists to fill out the season. I also am really interested usually in casting people who might be debuting in a role or who have never sung with us. And it's important to have, in terms of casting, a balance between people who your audience has heard and you know they like them, they tell you, and then new voices. So once you get sort of the leading people planned into things and you know what production you're doing and who is going to conduct it and who's going to direct it, you then can fill out sort of the lower ranks. And for us, the lower ranks are often guest artists, other artists as well, but also we have a fantastic young artist program, the K-Fritz Young Artist Program. And those are 12 singers and 2 pianists who stay with us for 2 to 3 years. And they often do all of the smaller roles, but they also will do certain other parts of our season, which are specifically geared to them. I mentioned the American Opera Initiative operas. They always do all of those. We also have a wonderful tradition of doing a holiday opera every December. And with that, that is always cast with the young artists. And I think of the young artists as our home team because they not only do generally the holiday opera, the American Opera Initiative, they usually are doing support in concerts. We often do a couple of concerts in a season. But they also are members of the community. You see them in the broader community performing anywhere from singing the national anthem at a baseball opening to performing in events, parties, public gatherings. During COVID, we had opera on a truck going everywhere, which we still do things like that. So they really are, the balance to, let's say, the big, well-known established artists balancing with the K-Fritz Young artists, or perhaps, other guest artists on their way up. I personally try with the K-Fritz Young artists, after they've been with us for 2 or 3 years, to re-engage them for leading roles coming up. Because again, I think it's important, we've invested a lot of money in them to train them. So we want to make sure that we are getting our investment back so that they are getting the experience with us. And again, audiences, when they have familiarity with certain artists, they love to see them over and over. Okay, so now we're kind of usually about a year in advance where we will have operas planned, all the creative teams, all the casting done. And then, honestly, we're working much farther down the line then. So what happens when a season gets going? For us, we do not perform in the summer, which is great because that's a wonderful time for planning. But we generally tend to have all of our works in the fall, then a winter block, and then a big spring block. And so, of course, each of these blocks require huge preparation. So what does a rehearsal process look like for an opera? Generally, an opera will rehearse about 5 weeks. That means that all the singers will arrive from hither and yon, and some are in residence permanently here. Many people are guests, and this requires, obviously providing housing, all of that. Visas, if they come from somewhere else, which have gotten incredibly difficult. Visas are difficult. And obviously, we're in a political climate that's changing rapidly, so it may be getting even more difficult to bring in foreign artists. And so we start rehearsing 5 weeks in advance. And so the first couple of days of rehearsal are always dedicated to working on just the music. The singers work with the conductor, going through all the music, and the singers, when they arrive, they already know their music, or should know their music, because when they don't, it's a problem. It's different than when you do a musical, because in a musical, usually the actors are learning the music while you're rehearsing. But opera singers, they arrive, they know their roles, and the conductor is shaping with them. And since I know you're all singers, it's about tempi, it's about interpretation, it's about, where they're breathing. And once that's gone for a couple of days, we then begin staging rehearsals. We do our staging rehearsals in a big rehearsal studio, actually in Tacoma Park, away from the Kennedy Center. We have a large warehouse, And in the warehouse, there are 3 big rehearsal studios that are the size of the Opera House stage. Our costume shop with thousands of costumes is there. Our production department is housed there, and our K for Young Artist program is housed there. So we generally have 3 weeks or so in the rehearsal studio where daytime rehearsals are dedicated to working with the director and all of the soloists staging the opera. How are we interpreting it? What are they doing? What's the physicality? What prop do I have? Concurrent with that, everyone is doing, all the artists are doing costume fittings, extra coaches, language, diction, depending on what language we're doing a piece in. Evenings are dedicated to rehearsals with the chorus. The chorus are professional, but often have daytime jobs, so they are available only in the evenings or weekends to rehearse. The same thing with kids. Kids go to school, they're only available in the evenings or weekends to rehearse. So the days can be quite long, honestly. They can generally start at 10 in the morning and go till 10 at night. After 3 weeks in the room, we have usually put together the opera, this physical staging of the opera. And we don't have any of the scenery. They've had their costume fittings, but then we have a process of about 2 weeks where we go to whatever stage we're going to at the Kennedy Center, and where we then begin first just with piano, rehearsing on stage. We call them technical rehearsals with the scenery. Meanwhile, often in another room, the conductor is rehearsing the orchestra alone. Then there comes a point where we add sort of elements. It's like making a very complicated bolognese sauce. You know, you want to add the ingredients at the right time. So you do technical rehearsals for several days. Very slowly, you're working on lighting. How are people getting on and off? What are they doing physically on the, let's say there's stairs, there are platforms, there's a rake. Then with the next element we add is the costumes. And these are still what we call piano tech rehearsals or piano dress rehearsals. And this is where we see the costumes, the wigs, the makeup. We figure out things like quick changes. You know, people go from being a Russian soldier to a French soldier in 30 seconds. So how are they ripping off their clothes and putting something on? Once we've worked out all of the technical things and the costumes, we then add the orchestra. And the conductor usually has a rehearsal that they are in charge of called a Sitzprobe, which means a sitting rehearsal, although we tend not to sit anymore, where the orchestra plays and the singers just sing. They don't do any of the physical staging. And this is to really unify the singers with the orchestra, the conductor, and for the orchestra to hear the singers. Once that happens, we add the orchestra to the stage with the costumes, with the lights, with everything all together. And these rehearsals are we usually do about 3 of them before a final dress rehearsal. I'm sure many of you have gone to a dress rehearsal and seen it, and we generally, of course, try not to stop. These rehearsals have, you know, before they actually even start, usually have about 4 hours of preparation for everybody coming in. You know, there's wig and makeup calls. The crew is setting up, the stage crew is setting up. So that often, you know, you may start a rehearsal at 7 at night, but many people have been there since 8 in the morning, or come in at 1, or come in at 5. So often, just to get, let's say, a big opera, let's say, you know, you're doing La Boheme, okay? There'll be 60 chorus, 24 children's chorus, 10 soloists, a group of 12 dancers maybe in the orchestra, 60 to 70 people. There's also backstage musicians. So all of this takes an incredible amount of coordination. The person who coordinates it on stage is called the stage manager, which is different than the director who is sitting out front putting it together. The stage manager and their team are the people who work backstage, not unlike an airport controller, making sure that all the pieces are going together and coming together at the right time, at the right place. People are on stage, they've got their right costume, their right props, etc. And these rehearsals, if you are backstage, it can seem incredibly chaotic because there are so many people moving around. It's like a huge village backstage usually, because there often will be places where people are changing their costumes quickly. dressing rooms are not usually on the stage level, so they're up and down elevators and stairs. So there's just a lot of traffic. Whereas, there might just be one person on stage, but there might be hundreds of people backstage ready to come on or working or whatever. And then once you get into the run of performances, honestly, performances I find get better as you go along. Of course, people love to go to an opening night. And I find opening nights incredibly nerve-wracking. They're very stressful because a lot of things can go wrong. Opera has a lot of elements, and a lot of things can go wrong, and they do. And so I find often that when the performance gets broken in, gets run in, it really gets better. So usually we will have the minimum of 6 performances, sometimes up to 12 performances of an opera. And I find that, when you see a show later in the run, it just suddenly feels so much better and so much smoother. And the performances have grown. The artists have taken on so much more, often interpreting their characters, how they sing something. The orchestra has settled. Everything is settled often much more into a cohesive whole. So I personally prefer seeing later. I mean, I tend to see most performances that we're putting on, but it is really an incredible experience. So that's sort of the arc of from when I sit down and think about it until we get it onto the stage. So for example, I'll show you, I thought I'd share, we're in the middle of our season, but I thought I'd share with you just the sort of the let's say the deck that's about the season. So and I can tell you a little bit about each thing and maybe some fun stuff. So I'm going to share my screen. Give me one moment while I go to advanced technology here. Get rid of this, excuse me. Okay. Presentation mode. There we go. So this is the season that we are currently in. I don't know how to make everybody disappear on the side here so that you can see the whole image. Hang on, let me see if I can make all this disappear.
We can see all of it, Francesca. We just see the slide.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you. Okay, good. Thank you, Keely. All right. Oh, okay, that's my backyard. Obviously not now, it's covered in snow. Okay, so this season, and I'll go through each one of these individually, we opened the season with Fidelio, Beethoven's only opera, in a production that had a fairly contemporary feeling, and I'll show you a little bit more about that, which we balanced, I felt, with, so Beethoven I wanted to balance with Verdi. So the fall rep had Verdi's Macbeth. And then we had a concert, a big Wagner concert, a celebration called Gods and Mortals, where we did a lot of Wagner work. Then we've had our holiday opera, which we just finished, which was Jungle Book. And then we've just finished our American Opera Initiative, and we're coming up on our spring rep, which will be The Revolution of Steve Jobs and Porgy and Bess. And so let me show you a little bit about, so when I was planning the season, the things that were important to me were, after COVID, each year we have added more things. So we have a lot more offerings this year. We have a lot more opera in the Opera House. It's important to have a span of repertory. This year we have, Verdi, Beethoven, Mason Bates, Gershwin, and a lot of new singers. And at the Kennedy Center, we are getting ready for America 250, which we will soon be announcing. So these are some images of the Fidelio and some of the cast that we had. And it was also it was important to me to introduce our new music director, Robert Spano, who began this year with us. We had a great cast with Sinead Campbell as the protagonist, Shamez McCorkle. These are pictures, now I'm going to show you, of the model, not production pictures, but actually the model, which is what we work with when we are figuring things out. So if you know the piece, this is actually Florestan Cell. Now this model, for anybody who's into architecture or engineering is on a half-inch scale. And what it is it allows us to move the pieces around and to figure out how to do things. So again, that's all part of the planning that goes a year in advance. The same thing with figuring out how many people fit on stage. Where are we going to put them? All of that is planned out in advance. This is the chorus scene in the finale. These are various costume sketches. Again, costume designer starts with sketches, then we get into things like numbers. How many numbers, how many costumes, how many quick changes? This is a picture of the Macbeth, again, which we just closed. You may have heard, if you live in DC, our final performance, there was a flood in the Opera House of the Kennedy Center. There was a fire up above and the Opera House flooded, so we had our final performance in Lister Hall as a sort of semi-stage concert. That was exciting. That's the kind of thing where, as the artistic director, you have to come up with solutions with the staff very quickly, like the day of. So these are just various images. So it started out, this is first the model, then you saw the picture of what the set looked like. Again, this was just figuring out how it's going to work. These are costumes. These are costume fittings. We always take a picture of everybody in a costume fitting so that we know exactly what they're going to look like on stage. We then, as I said, we did a huge Wagner concert, which was incredibly popular, I'm glad. And we have more Wagner coming in our repertory soon. And then now we are about to start rehearsals for The Revolution of Steve Jobs, which is by Mason Bates, who was the previous Kennedy Center composer in residence. Right now it's Carlos Simon, who, by the way, started with us as a young composer, writing his first opera, 20 minutes long. Now it's 5-6 years ago. So this production is a shared production with the Atlanta Opera. And you can see here, I sort of have listed, who we've put together: conductor, director, and the cast. This is a way, again, of often how I share with the staff and other people. This is a picture of what the production will look like. It's if you have not seen this opera and you're in our area, I really recommend that you come see it. Obviously you can imagine what the story is about, but it's really about sort of inside of the man, inside of his head, and his relationship, especially with his wife, Lorene. These are some images of the performers. Wei Wu, he began in our Young Artist program. Some pictures of the production. Again, these are all what we use for planning. And then we'll be closing our season with Porgy and Bess, which we call that it's a revival, which means that we own the production, and we did it before in I can't remember, 2011, I think 2008. And since then, it has traveled to other cities, which is, again, it's just kind of an important part of the economics of what we do. If you own a production and other companies rent it, it gives your company income, which is a really important thing. It's an important part of our budgeting process. So we have a great cast coming up for this year. That opens in May. Some images from the production. Sporting Life and Bess. That actually is Freddie Ballantyne, who performed the role of Sporting Life the last time we did it. And then after we did it, he ended up being hired by the Met to do it. So I'm very proud of a lot of people who've come through with us. We will be doing a concert at the end of the season where we will be celebrating American music with Tom Hampson and Renee Fleming. So we're just in the throes of sort of planning that repertory. As I said, we have a lot of other ongoing programs, which again are all important to support the main thing that you are doing. As I said before, the American Opera Initiative, we did them last weekend. Every year they sell out, and they bring in an incredibly diverse audience. Our holiday opera this year was The Jungle Book by Kelly Rourke and Kamala Sankaram, It's a wonderful way. You have usually 20 kids chorus, young artists. This year, we also collaborated with an Indian dance company. And these pieces are orchestrated. This is performed in the Terrace. It was 6 sold-out performances. And then every year we are the recipient of a grant from the Marian Anderson Foundation. We choose one artist to do a recital and community work. So these are some of the past recipients. Larry Brownlee, Solomon Howard, Janae Bridges, Justin Austin, Ryan Speedo Green, Will Liverman, Freddie Ballantyne. And this program has been incredible, not just because of the recital that they do every year, but they always dedicate at least a week to working in the community with young people. We also have received a grant to give what we call a True Voice Award, where we do a recital every other year for a singer who identifies as transgender or non-binary. That we don't have it this year, but we will have it back next year. And then we have a huge commitment, of course, to the community. Every year we do one opera at Nats Stadium. This past year it was Turandot. This coming summer it will be Porgy and Bess, and this gets, last year we had more than 10,000 people there. These are some of our young artists. Again, the K-Fritz Young Artists. As I said, it's 12 singers and 2 pianists. That program is run by Chris Cano, who is one of my deputies, along with Sam Gelber, who is in charge of casting. And that's like this season, just so you get a sense of sort of, that's everything that we had to put together for this season. So we are about to announce next season, so I can't tell you anything about it. I'm sorry, but again, it's the whole thing of planning all of the operas and everything that we're doing so far. So now I have been talking for about 40 minutes. I don't see any questions, so I'm getting paranoid. Are you listening and are you happy? Is everything okay? What's the best way to get into opera with a late start and little prior exposure? Well, first of all, we have an open door. Okay. The best way to get into opera, I think, some people say go see a popular opera. But I also think a lot of contemporary operas are great because they're sung in English. So first of all, everything we do is with super titles above the stage, an immediate translation in English of what is being sung, if it's being sung in another language and also in English. I think the best way to go is, buy the 2 operas this spring. I think are vastly different and fascinating. The Revolution of Steve Jobs is contemporary music, which is very listenable, very melodic. And Porgy and Bess is an American classic opera full of amazing tunes. So I would say start there. And then before you come, we have lots of stuff on our website always about pieces, reading the synopsis, reading a little bit about the history. I think all of that will enhance your experience. How do you become a supernumerary? Actually, how do you become it? We
It's
hire
a link, Francesca. There's a link in the chat, or I'll send it in the chat, but it's a link to a Google form that you can apply with.
All right, this is Keely, one of our colleagues.
Hi, everyone.
Okay. So that is how you get it. And then for the chorus, it's the same thing. You have to audition for that. Okay. How are we doing? Other questions? What is the median cost of producing an opera today? Depressing. I will give you our annual budget for everything we do is in the mid 20 millions. It's very hard to say like what each opera costs. You can say physically what a production costs, scenery and costumes. That ranges usually from $150,000 to $1 million. But then of course your budget is, artistic, all the personnel costs, all the staffing, annual staff costs. So you can think of the physical production basically is about $150 to $1 million. And if you would like to make a donation for that amount and to sponsor production, you can write to me immediately after this presentation, okay? Does the attendance of the US president or other VIPs influence the performance? No, actually. I mean, I will say the Biden administration has come a lot. But we often, you can't tell people that the president or the vice president is there. You can look up and see if they are there. But I will say in the previous Trump administration, they never attended. However, in the new Trump administration, the Vances have come very often to our offerings that are for you. They were at our holiday opera Jungle Book. They were at our holiday opera last year when he was a senator. So they seem to be coming a lot. And Usha Vance, the now wife of the vice president, was on our board before he took his present office. So I hope she will continue on the board because she loves the arts. Do we receive funding from the federal government? The Kennedy Center, because it is a national monument, receives funding from the federal government. We receive some money from the National Endowment from the Arts. We do not receive a lot of money. Most of our money comes from about 35% is from earned income, 65% is from foundations, grants, and the generosity of private individuals. Your ticket only covers a third of the costs. Is there an endowment for the Kennedy Center? Yes, there is an endowment for the Kennedy Center, and there is an endowment for the Washington National Opera. I do not know the size of the endowment for the Kennedy Center. I do know our endowment is actually growing rather healthily. And if you look in the annual report, I believe the amount that it is listed at is there, although I do not know the answer. I do not want to say the wrong answer. But the federal government, it's not like, Germany gives a lot of money to culture. France gives a lot of money to culture. The United States has historically not given a lot of money to culture. So we have to rely very much on the generosity of many private donors. And because Washington, D.C., it's not a city identified with sort of major industries, it's not like we have a lot of corporate support. We have a lot more private support than corporate support, the way other companies might have a lot more corporate support. What is the process to get involved as a chorus member? Again, Keely, do you have that audition site to apply? Yes.
I'll send that in the chat as well.
Okay, thank you. The chorus auditions, the chorus auditions happen normally in, I want to say in March, I think. And so you can audition for the chorus, and the chorus, all chorus members are members of AGMA, the American Guild of Musical Artists.
If you all scroll down on the page that I sent the link to for the supers, it's actually the same link. Auditions are this weekend and next.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize it was so soon. All right. Corporations historically only make up 4-5% of national giving. Yes, it's just that some places, the Seattle Opera, Boeing gives a huge amount, for example. I mean, it's just, I think every market is different. And we are fortunate to have some very generous donors. We also receive a certain portion of our funding from the Kennedy Center, and we share certain staff. But you actually have to be able to sing opera to be in the chorus. Well, you have to have a classically trained voice usually to want to be in an operatic chorus. But people audition and they've only sung in their church choir, and then they end up in the opera chorus. The opera chorus, it's part of, we do teach everyone in the opera chorus all the music, also languages, etc. which there are music rehearsals for the chorus before they begin staging rehearsals. Where are the guest performers housed? DC, Virginia, hotels, apartments. So that used to be like much sort of smaller sphere. Now in the age of Airbnb, we give people a per diem if they're guest artists, and we tell them where there is temporary housing, short-term apartment lets, but most people these days want to find their housing themselves with with a per diem. And as you know, Washington, D.C. in that sense is really lucky because there's so many temporary people going in and out of here. There's so many temporary apartment situations. So we often find that people in the rehearsal process, they want to live in Tacoma Park for a couple of weeks, right near the rehearsal studio. And Tacoma Park is charming if you have never been there. And then they move to the Kennedy Center area, to Foggy Bottom, and rent a second place and move down there so that they are much closer. Most people on the road, and I will tell you, I work on the road a lot myself as a director. I'm in a hotel right now, actually in Fort Worth. Tend to want to have an apartment so they can cook and eat well. What's the strategy behind the productions in the National Stadium? The strategy is twofold. First of all, to introduce ourselves to often a new audience, people who might not necessarily come to the opera, and then I would say benevolent on our side to enable families and a lot of people to come for free to the opera. People love sitting on the infield, on the grass, and picnicking. So it introduces people to opera, and it also, I think, is doing a great thing for the community. Have we seen a shift in those attending productions as a result of this initiative? Yes. I mean, I think, we track very much who is in the audience, of course. We have worked very hard to create wide diversity in our audience, racial diversity, age diversity. And I think that we are pretty successful when I look out at our audience. And so I think the national stadiums is one component of that. I imagine a concern is with those involved in choral is this type of art form might not be as popular with the younger generation. So we find that younger audiences come to the American Opera Initiative, the New Works. They come to, we usually do one opera where we also have our young artists do the whole thing. So this year it's The Revolution of Steve Jobs. And last year it was La Boheme. Those performances are priced very super low, like super cheap. Those I find often are full of young kids working on the Hill and everywhere. I'm always amazed. And they often tell me they like classical works. Then there's a portion of younger people who like new works. So I think I know statistically we are doing better than a lot of our colleague companies in terms of younger audiences. I attribute that partially to the DC metro area has a lot of very educated younger people. It's just because they work in government, they may not be, making a ton of money, but they're educated and interested in culture and want to experience the Kennedy Center. Is there any chance we will do the ring cycle again? We would love to do the ring cycle again. Doing the ring cycle is super expensive. The ring cycle, as you may know, is 4 operas. You do them in 1 week. It takes a lot of time to rehearse. It takes a couple of months. The ring cycle rehearses for 3 or 4 months. We would love to do it again. And our co-producer of the ring cycle was the San Francisco Opera, and they have announced that they will be doing it again in 2 years. And I hope we can do it. We do have other Wagner coming in the future, and I'm working hard to get that in there. Are the auditions in person? No, they have to be in person. They can't be virtual. Sorry. Other things. I would love to give a plug for next season, but I can't because we haven't announced it. So I am going to plug that I hope that anybody and everybody who is on this call will come see The Revolution of Steve Jobs or Porgy and Bess. The performances are throughout April and May. And I do think our pricing is very reasonable. There are plenty of inexpensive tickets. There are plenty of expensive tickets too. But it's also a lot of fun to come to the Kennedy Center. There's a lot of other things to do within the building, whether that be seeing the many exhibits that are there, eating there, just walking around and experiencing the whole thing there. So I urge and hope that you will come to them. Do we use the Millennium Stage to promote opera? If you don't know this, folks, the Millennium Stage is a stage in the Great Hall at the end of it, which every day, I think it's 365 days or 364 minus Christmas, does a free show from 6 o'clock till 7 o'clock. And it is programmed with everything, jazz, country, rock, opera, classical, everything. We have a certain number of slots that we are responsible for presenting operas or presenting operatic material on the Millennium Stage. And so we do that usually featuring our young artists. We also, other free things I should mention are that if you are attending the opera and the person who wanted to know more, every night before the opera, 1 hour before, there is a free lecture in the Opera House by a member of our team, the music staff, the staging staff, who will give you a fantastic perspective. We also have often after performances, free discussions or Q&As. And then, I see, Brian says, you perform in the main hall every year, 12/26. Okay, you get the day after Christmas slot. That's fantastic. So it definitely helps promote opera. And again, that's one of the things that, we work so hard on is to reach out in so many different ways to so many different people, and to garner, hopefully, so many new audiences. The other ways, of course, to get new audiences are diversity in programming. The fact that we have presented, I just feel like we've presented every possible kind of opera, and our casting is incredibly diverse. I have a casting policy that is 50% of who we cast is non-white. So it may be Asian, Black, Latinx. That has been my casting policy for 12 years. My policy in terms of creative teams has been 50% women for 12 years. So we've presented more female directors, conductors, and designers than any other opera company. And that all of those things influence people buying tickets. That makes a big difference. The same way doing a holiday opera with so many kids in it, youth in it, that brings in families who then the parents say, okay, we'll go see an opera without the kids. So all of these are initiatives, not only artistic, but also ways of developing audiences. Just like I hope tonight, I hope that I've captured some of your fancy and that some of you will come to the Opera House. Brian has graciously put this up. Oh my God, $39 tickets? Come on. Thank you, Brian. What are your thoughts on a pay what you can model being implemented by Opera Philadelphia with the help of a philanthropic audience to build an audience? So Opera Philadelphia got a grant where they offered all tickets for $11. I think it's great, but I also think there can be a catch that when you don't have that, are they going to come back? And that's why I think that we have tried to pitch pricing, as you can see, $39 to, whatever a box costs, which I think that $11 ticket, I think it's great, but I'm nervous. I know my colleague very well, Anthony. A lot of new people have come, and I hope that they will come back. Is captioning provided in English? Captioning is provided in English for English operas for everything at all times. It is not it is at every single performance, and every single seat can easily read this. So, and Dean Hearn, this has been great. Thank you. Mark Kelly, who lives in New Jersey, are there any events planned in this area or this state? No, I'm sorry, but we have a lot of people who are from New Jersey who work for us. So you might want to come down and see them. So I think I'm probably going to wrap it up now. You've been a lovely audience. I'm sorry not to see you all individually, but I'm grateful that you're here, and I'm grateful to my new friend Brian for getting everybody here. And so please reach out through Brian if there's anything else that myself or any of my colleagues, Keely, that we can answer or help you with. And please come to the Kennedy Center. This was great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Francesca. That was a brilliant presentation. I learned a great deal, and I know our members and singers did as well. And I want to underline in the chat, the Revolution of Steve Jobs runs it runs in May, and there is a special offer for Encore Creativity for Older Adults members. You can call the number that's in the chat and just mention that offer number that's provided there, or you can click that link that I put there. And that was something that WNO offered to me and to Joshua in the email exchanges that we had in setting up this masterclass. So we're grateful to you for giving us that discount, and I hope our members take advantage of it.
I do
Thank you
too.
for being here, Francesca. This was brilliant. And Karen, I love that idea. Maybe we'll be able to put that in the Encore newsletter. That's a good idea. Yeah. And for those of you that are watching on demand, please feel free, if you have any questions, to send us a question to info@encorecreativity.org. And we'll, if you are willing to, Keely, reach out directly with any specific questions that our singers may have after they review this presentation.
Of course.
All right. Well, if we could give Francesca Zambello a big round of applause. Thank you so much for being here, Francesca.
It was fun. It was really fun. Thank you for caring about the arts, everybody. Super important now. The arts are our bridge to be able to talk to each other.
Indeed. Well said. Thank you very much.
Good
Thank you
night.
for attending our newest version of our Masterclass series, and have a lovely evening.
Thank you.